Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. In this week's episode of the show, we're going to be exploring one of the biggest challenges financial advisors face. And maybe it's one you're facing right now: business development. Now, when you hear the phrase business development, you're likely thinking sales, as in, I need to develop some more business. I need more business, more clients, more assets under management. And that's a big part of it. But business development is also about developing your business into a more stable and robust firm. And as this week's guest, Dr. Jean, the Results Queen, Ausler, explains, it's our crazy caveman brains that often get in the way of developing our businesses to the fullest. And I think you're going to love Jean. She really knows how to break things down so that our caveman brains can really easily understand them and implement them. Anyway, before we get rolling, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon, the YouTubes, or wherever you like to get your podcast jam on. And if you have a question or a suggestion for a guest or a topic of the show, hit me up. I'm basically at Mike Langford everywhere. You can see the email down in the show notes there. You can click that as well and shoot us a note, okay? All right, let's get to our conversation with Dr. Jean, the Results Queen, Ausler. Here we go. Well, Dr. Jean, the Results Queen, Ausler, so wonderful to see you. Welcome to the Modern Financial Advisor podcast.
I am so excited to be here today. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. I'm thrilled that you're here. I'm thrilled that you were patient with me with my technical difficulties, with my restart type of stuff. I tripped over my own words. So I promise from here out, we're just going to crush it. It's going to be amazing.
I'm in.
All right. Let's do it. Let's do it. Well, let's start with a bang today. One of the things you said to me on our prep call for this episode, when I asked you, like, is this the right audience for you? Because I wasn't 100% sure. Like, our audience is primarily financial advisors and wealth management executives. And you said, I love financial advisors, with like a lot of enthusiasm, which was awesome. It was great, right? So, and then you said, one of the core reasons why you love them is they need to be way better business developers. And I think I'm paraphrasing there, but I'm like, well, that's kind of funny. That cracks me up, because that's kind of like a personal trainer saying, I love people who work a desk job. They need to be way better at exercising, right? So, anyways, I think it's a funny way of saying, probably saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there's a ton of room for growth, right? For financial advisors. There's a great opportunity. So let's get into it. What do you see when you look at the average advisor's business development process that gets you so excited?
Oh, there's so much that gets me super excited about financial advisor. I actually literally did the happy dance during our prep call. I was like, yes, love financial advisors. Yeah. And it's so fascinating, because most people are like, financial advisors. I think they're so awesome. I think they're super smart. And the big challenge I have for financial advisors is that there's a lot of them. And a lot of people think they're like cockroaches. They're just everywhere, and they're only just like, here's my business card. Can I take your money? And for the business development process, they need to be able to bring in more business. A lot of them inherit some business, or they've gone to their friends and family, and then they have to grow more, and they just don't know how to do that. They don't necessarily get a lot of support from their manager, complex director, right? And they're on their own. And most financial advisors, their biggest fear is to come across as pushy, salesy, or aggressive. So they hope, no offense and said with love, that the person across the table will say yes to them. And what we've developed is a way for them a whole system that's easy to do, that doesn't make you pushy, salesy, aggressive, because it's all about what we call caveman brain. And once we developed caveman brain and teach caveman brain, financial advisors, it goes up throughout the roof, and they start to love business development. I mean, like, superly love it. And I can think to myself, how many financial advisors hate business development? Like, they have to do it, but they hate it. So that's what's super exciting, is to change people from the to the
Yeah. It's really interesting. I love, some advisors might be like, I think I'm a little offended about being like considered a cockroach, if that's the way the public sees me. But I will say this: one of the things that's really interesting about the advisor business model, right? Especially the modern financial advisor business model, is, it's built on recurring revenue, and it builds over time. And so I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's relatively predictable if you stick with it, because everybody trips over a client here and there. You mentioned some friends and families or whatever, and then a couple of referrals here and there. Over time, you're bound to build a business that is pretty good, right? That's going to bring in a pretty decent revenue. The challenge, as you're alluding to, is most of that is, for a lot of advisors, is somewhat luck, and just kind of happened over time. Some of them get their start and they're like crush it as sales guys or sales ladies, right? But the average advisor doesn't, as you mentioned. So let's dive into something you mentioned. You talked about the caveman brain, right? So like most coaches and consultants, you have a system or a lens for evaluating and solving the challenges your clients face. Your lens, the caveman brain. Now, one of the things I like to do for our audience here is break things down Barney style. It's a saying from the military, as many of people who listen to the show or watch the show have heard. They say break it down Barney style, which basically means break it down so a preschooler could understand this, right? They use that in the military all the time. Like, don't go using jargon or complicated words. I should be able to explain this to the lowest person on the totem pole and they can get it and run with it. But today we're going to break things down caveman style, Captain Caveman style, which I don't know if you remember that. Dating myself, Captain Caveman from the old days. So what is the caveman brain and how does it help advisors produce better results? Or the caveman business growth system, caveman brain business growth system, I guess.
So let's just talk about caveman brain. And it's so interesting because I say to my clients, you have to explain it to me like I'm 5.
Yeah.
And if I don't understand it, no one else is going to. So I do everything from I'm explaining it to you like you're 5 years old. So caveman brain it literally came from me. Everything that I do, I teach and I consult on, I've done myself. And so I know all the kinks and where it works. And there came a time in my own business that I was not growing or doing the things that I needed to do. So I thought to myself, I need to do better. How am I going to do better? I really truly believe in coaching. So I hired not 1, not 2, not 3. I hired 4 separate coaches to get me out of this funk, this terrible place, this ditch hole, so that I could become better. One of them happened to be a Harvard neuroscientist. And working with the Harvard neuroscientist, I learned that the amygdala, which is a small almond-shaped part of our brain, sits in the back of our head, was preventing me from being more successful. And I thought, wow, like our brain is the least studied organ in our body. And we're just learning about what it can be doing and how it can help us. So once I learned that my amygdala was preventing me from being more successful, I just couldn't say that word over and over again. It was a little hard for me. And then people correct me if I say it wrong. So I just called it my caveman brain. It was just easier. And I found from caveman brain that once I learned how to harness it, I was able to be super successful in new business development and in leadership and a lot of other places. And what I did was I launched that into the marketplace and found out that specifically financial advisors were the ones who were really the most into caveman brain because they had the most challenges from a psychological point of view of moving forward because they don't want to be pushy, salesy, or aggressive because there's a lot of them. And what's interesting about caveman brain is in the sales process, and we don't even call it sales, we call it new business development because sales is a 4-letter word, especially for financial advisors. And the idea is that, look, you can do wallet share all day long, but new is what is going to make a difference.
Right.
So for us, wallet share is like gravy. If you can learn how to bring in new, you will be so much more successful for yourself, for your company, your family. So that's how we developed Caveman Brain Business Growth System. Now you said to me, well, talk to me about Caveman Brain and explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. Well, I just did that part. But let me tell you where it comes from. So it comes from 4 places. It comes from your childhood. It comes from your parents. It comes from your culture, and it comes from your life experience. So many of our financial advisors gives me this story. I brought my chemistry test home and I got a 97 and my parents said, where are the other 3 points?
That's funny.
And what we find in that so many advisors are focusing on the other 3 points that they don't realize that 97% is pretty good. So the fact is that when you're going through the sales process or the new business development process, always looking for the other 3 points, it really impacts you in a negative way as opposed to leaning on your strengths and attracting the people that you want, which brings me to the second thing. Besides parents and childhood and culture and life experiences, is so many advisors say, when you say, like, who are you looking to talk to? They go, I'm looking for high net worth individuals or families. So we had a private coaching client, and I said to her, who's your ideal target client? And she said, the woman who drives the bus. And I said to her, I can still remember this, and I was like, okay, so if you were to go to a networking event and there were all women there, do you go up to them and then say, hey, are you the woman who drives the bus? So the fact is that most of them can't describe their ideal target client like their science project. Remember when we were all in fourth grade and we got, like whales and we knew everything about whales? Most advisors don't know enough about their ideal target client to go find them, or more importantly, to attract them.
So I'm going to jump in here real quick for a quick second, and then we'll get to steps 3 and 4 of this. I just want to lend some credence and like back it up. So I love what you were talking about, where advisors are a little afraid to lean into their strengths. They focus on their weaknesses. And it's funny, we were talking about our kids before we click record, and both of us have a son named Jackson. Boop, boop, Jackson rules. Anyway, but like, it's one of the things that I advise both of my kids: lean into your strengths, because everybody has weaknesses. If you spend all your time, like my son math was not his strength in high school. And it's just, it frustrated him a lot. I'm like, dude, it's okay. You're not going to be a mathematician. You're not going to be a scientist. You need to know functional math. Beyond that, you're great. Just focus on the things you're good at and lean into it. Like, now, don't have a weakness that's crippling, right? Like, if you can't talk to people as a financial advisor, you're not going to, if that's a weakness of yours, right? You're going to develop that type of thing, but don't let your weaknesses hold you back. Lean into your strengths. I love that. And then the second one, and I've told this story before, but not recently, when you talk about the failure to be able to articulate who your target client is. And I always say, like, how much money somebody has does not make them part of the target market, because you want to know why? People don't walk around going, I have $1 million. Says so on my shirt. I have $1 million of AUM to M to manage. Is there an advisor here? Like, no one does that. So you cannot, yes, you can target by zip code and blah, 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 blah. But that's not a target market. That is a constraint for who you work with. Like, okay, you're in my target market. Oh, and you have enough money to work with me. Wonderful. One of the best examples of a target market that just radically changed my viewpoint on advisor. It was one of the best things ever. I was speaking at an advisor conference, and it was like a top producer conference. Like, so you have to be doing millions of dollars of, revenue to be in this room. And I was sitting there looking out at the crowd, and like a lot of these top producer conferences, it's like a sausage fest. It's nothing but dudes looking back at you for the most part, right? And I see like this one woman, and she's a younger lady, and she's sitting kind of close to the stage. And then after, as I was coming off the stage, she comes up to ask me a question. This is awesome, because I wanted to ask her, like, you're a rare, person in this room. She's like, oh yeah, like she asked me the question, and I said, tell me about your business. She's like, well, I did over $1 million last year. I'm like, how long have you been doing this? She's like, oh, less than 10 years. And she's like, I'm 30. Like, this is amazing. So what's your deal with your business? She's like, I like widows.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what? And she's like, I like widows. I built my whole business on widows. And the first one was kind of an accident. And then she's like, but what I found out was she knew other widows, because of the same general age bracket, like other people in her network, their husbands would pass, and most of the women from that generation, they didn't manage the money. The husband managed the money. And she's like, you know what, Mike? They love me. I get lots of referrals. My whole business is built on this, estate attorneys and yada, yada, funeral directors, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
She goes, what's really interesting? They've never once questioned my fee. They're always thrilled that I'm there. So anyways, I didn't even take us on that sidetrack. Well, actually, I did mean to, but I thought it lends credence to the things you're talking about on those first 2 points.
Well, if we could, I always say to people, take the client that you love the most. I
Mm,
actually did this for me. My favorite client at the time was a woman named Mimi. So we call the exercise the Mimi exercise.
yeah.
And I loved Mimi. If I could have like 25 Mimis, I would have been like, yay, my practice is fabulous. And then you describe Mimi to like the nth degree that you could literally be in the airport and go, oh, there's Mimi. She's
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
Right. Or he's right there. Right. And that's understanding your ideal target client like your science project. And most financial advisors do not. Like if you just, after this podcast, sit down and stop with the high net worth individuals or families or family offices or I need $5 million or 250, whatever it is. Describe them like you're taking them to your party. To tell them like, hey, Mike, I'm coming to the house and I'm bringing my Mimi with you. And this is what Mimi does. And this is how Mimi acts. And this is what Mimi says. And this is where she hangs out. And this is her language. And they just don't do that. Makes me crazy.
I talk about that, the language part that you mentioned all the time. It's, hey, look, I call my customers clients. Most financial advisors call their customers clients. But at a restaurant, they call them diners or patrons, right? Some people call their customers customers. Some people call their customers users. Or it's like all on down the list, right? Patients, right? So a dentist or any type of doctor is going to call their client a patient, right? They're not calling them clients. Well, why does that matter? Well, they describe a lot of other things in their lives, including the problems they have or the hopes and dreams they have with different types of language, right? And that language can also be the way they dress, right? If you're dealing with a bunch of tech bros, tech founders as your target market, walking in with a three-piece suit to talk to them, not going to be good. You should be getting good at wearing jeans and t-shirts and whatever the cool sneakers of the day are, the hoodie of the day are, whatever, when you interact with your clients, right? So that stuff matters, right? Exactly to your point, go really granular on the persona of your ultimate client.
Yeah, and actually we teach people in our system not to call them prospects. They're
Yeah.
called potential clients. And
Oh, I
that's
like that.
because your caveman brain only knows what it sees and what it hears. And so therefore, since it only knows what it sees and hears, if you say prospects, I mean, look, prospects, like, I gotta go find some prospects today. But
Yeah.
wouldn't you much rather go see some potential clients? Like
Yeah.
that sounds really, hey, let me go find some potential clients. So one of the things that we use is we actually use the Clifton Strength Finders because they do, and it's really inexpensive. We're not associated with them with anything. But the fact is, it gives you your top 5 strengths. And what we find is when advisors know their top 5 strengths, they can use those strengths to lean into the new business development process and be successful. And we find that when they are not being successful, because you will fall off the rails, and we talk about how you get back on, you can go back and look at your strengths because they become your weaknesses. And then you start to figure out if you're using your strengths as weaknesses and how do you change them. Often, when we start to read people's Clifton Strength Finders, we find that they're leaning too much on a strength and it's become a weakness, which is what is preventing them from being more successful. So that's another caveman brain tip that you could be using to be
Yeah.
more successful in new business development.
I love it. I love it. It's funny to kind of put a little color on that. I think, a huge basketball fans in this household. My son wants to be an NBA coach. I both my kids play basketball, and I've coached basketball. So like a lot of the talk we have here revolves around basketball. But exactly, you may have a strength, and your strength might be 3-point shooting or whatever, right? Uh, but if you get to the point where like all you're willing to do is jack up threes, to your point, if you lean too much on that strength, it becomes a weakness because they know, hey, if Mike's got the ball and he's inside the 3-point line, if he's anywhere near the paint, he might not go up to try to finish that shot. He might actually either try to dribble out or kick it out or whatever. Or, conversely, if the person's afraid to shoot threes and they get the ball, even if they're wide open for the three, you're like, that dude's not shooting. So you back
Yeah.
off. And you just like let him sit there. So to your point, like don't let your strength. I think that's where you're going with this. Don't let your strength become a weakness because you're leaning so heavily on that you're not looking at other things in your business.
Yeah, strengths, we find that a lot of people who are stuck, they're using their strengths as weaknesses as opposed to making them as strengths. And interesting, well, I'll teach you this too because I'm a huge Tar Heel fan. I was
Okay.
raised to be to go to UNC. Both my parents went there. So we talk about in follow up because most people don't do a very good job in follow up. Financial advisors also. We talk about last minute thinking. And if you
Hmm.
know anything about being a Tar Heel fan, and if you're from Nova Nation, you know that I lost my team, like I lost, like I personally
You're
lost.
totally on
Uh,
the team. It's important.
like in
Fans
right
have
in
a
the
role.
last right in the last 0.0001 second. And we use that story because in new business development, if you're not following up and if you don't play to the very last second, you may not be able to close the potential client.
Right.
And therefore, you can win a major client in the last seconds of the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, really super important. So I don't rarely talk about that on podcasting, but thanks for the opportunity to
You're
say it.
anytime. You gotta
So appreciate
if we can
that.
get sports in, we'll do it. It's great. But you
Oh,
know, it's funny. I half joke about that, but like a lot of people, advisors at the moment, they're overwhelming percentage men, and women are advisors too. And I'm sure some of the women are also sports fans, right? But sports, it's a language that we all speak. I think everybody is, even if you're not a huge sports fan, you've seen some form of sporting competition, right? So it actually helps you frame things, and sometimes it also helps let people be a little easier on themselves, right? So, as an example, going back to the basketball thing, basketball's like a game of failure. It's a game of misses, right? Like even the best of the best of the best only hit 50% of the shots they take. Like the best shooting team in the history of basketball, my favorite team, the 1986 Boston Celtics, you know, only hit 50% of their shots, just under 50%. It was like 49.6% or something like that. That means half the shots they took missed, right? And so the same is going to happen for you as a financial advisor, whether it's a new business development or whatever. You're probably not going to get all of them. Now, I would say that if somebody gets to the meeting and they're sitting across the table from you, chances are there's a pretty good chance you're closing that, right? That new potential customer sits across the table from you. They've already evaluated it enough to get in front of you. So I bet you that close rate is way higher than 50%. Maybe you have different data than me. But anyway, let's talk about it. Let's continue your caveman brain.
I'm gonna, if you notice, I was rolling my eyes at you
Yeah.
while you were saying that, and you're kind of like, "Why are you doing that, Dr. Jean?" So most of the financial advisors we work with, they'll tell us the hardest place in the new business development process is to fill their funnel. And then they say things like this to me, Dr. Jean, if I get in front of them across the table, I can close them. I'm like, great, that's awesome. We just got to work on filling your funnel and doing
Right.
that consistently. Because most people like fill and drain, which is really annoying. So how are you consistent in terms of, because you got to do onboarding, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So how do you be consistently filling your funnel? That's a challenge that we actually solve. But what I find is that when you have people across the table, and this is something we call the facilitator buyer. What we do is we give our power away to the person across the table, especially financial advisors, because they don't want to come across as pushy, salesy, aggressive. And they let the person across the table drive the conversation, drive the decision. And then what happens is they call us and they say, so the person said yes to me, or I couldn't get another meeting, or they're not calling me back. Or so we get a lot of people who are what we call in the chase, and that's because they didn't ask for what we call DAT. So DAT stands for date and time. We actually have 6 killer questions that we teach people to tell, and I'm happy to tell them what they are. And most people will not ask the 6 killer questions because they're afraid. And one of them is, hey, Mike, would it be okay if we schedule another meeting to follow up and continue our conversation? And most people will say, yes, that'll be great. But I can't tell you how many people don't ask for DAT, and then they're in the chase, and then they don't know how to resurrect the conversation, which we have a whole process for that, because most of our financial advisors, until they get real comfortable saying, may I put a date and time on your calendar, they just, so yes,
I
you
love that.
might think that metrics, you might say, well, 50%. And that's the other thing we talk about is metrics, which again, financial advisors, which I find so fascinating because they're data people, right?
Yeah.
Except for themselves. They never want to keep the data on their new business development. We worked with a financial advisory firm for 4 years until we could finally convince them to. The first year we couldn't even figure out what their metrics were. And it was interesting. They said to us, 30 days. They said, "Hey, we're 30 days from our end date, like from our closing out our financial year." And I was like, and they didn't have a traditional calendar date, and we're like, "Oh, that's great." And they're like, "Well, this first time that we're so close, we haven't made our target number in 3 years." And we're all like, "On three, really?" Now we don't even know what the target number is. We've been working with them for 11 months. So we're like, okay, we're really close. So we said, okay, how much do you need to make? It's in November. And they said, we need to make $30 million by the end of November. This is like sometime in the end of October. I'm like, okay. So we do a hard court press to the whole organization. And on December 2nd, when we show back up, we said, so what happened? They go, we didn't make the number. And we're like, what? No. They go, yeah, we didn't make 30 million. We made 40. And we were like, yes, we made 40 million. Like, don't mess with me. Don't tell me you miss, because we don't mess. That's why I'm the results queen. It's all about making the number, right?
Yeah.
So this organization, and then I was like, well, do you have target numbers? Oh yeah, we just didn't want to tell you. Okay.
That's funny.
So 4 years later, we finally got them on a metrics dashboard. We had people who were being held accountable, and all 38 of their advisors were on, by that point, they had grown so much more. We had started out with 10, and then they were up to 38 4 years later because they had grown that much. And that took it. So people hate metrics.
Yeah.
Anyway.
What's really interesting is, I've heard this from more than one, a head of practice management at large independent broker dealers, right? So they have hundreds, if not thousands, of advisors that are working under their system. And very frankly, a lot of them will say, these heads of practice management will be like, listen, financial advisors are shitty business owners. Sorry for Chris. We'll mark this episode explicit. And what do they mean by that, right? And frankly, it goes back to one of the founding principles of this podcast series, is that we want to help financial advisors make the leap from owning a financial practice to owning a financial advisory business, a modern financial advisory business. And the key differentiation, and you just kind of hit on it in one format, is the key differentiation between a practice and a business is the practice relies on the owner/practitioner to deliver the service, and the business can operate without the owner and likely has many practitioners delivering the service, right? So and then they get serious about things like metrics. They get serious about having processes in place so that this is how we do this stuff at this business, and it makes the business more predictable. How do you go about, and I think you hit one nail on the head there, how do you go about helping clients migrate from a practice to a business? Because I'm sure you come across many advisors who are rolling solo, right? And they want to grow, but they've only ever rolled solo, right?
Well, interesting. We work with small, medium, and large, and we find that we want our advisors to think of themselves as business owners, regardless of if they're working wherever they are. And for those advisory firms that we work with, we usually roll in the EOS system, because the EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System, if you roll in that system, which has 6 key components, and it's an easy system to do, takes about 2 years to get it into your practice, it grows your practice by 35% on its own, just implementing it without anything else. So between our sales training and our EOS structure, your organization usually goes throughout the roof. And being a business owner is much different than being an employee. And even in these large advisory firms, I remember one group we were working with, she's like, I have to come into the office. This is pre-pandemic. I have to come in the office. I'm like, why? Well, the organization wants me to. I'm like, really? I think they probably want you out doing other things, and you could manage your business someplace else. And when she made that switch from employee to business owner, her business totally opened up and started growing. And it's a mindset shift. Hence why caveman brain is important, because you have to make the mindset shift, and then you have to learn how to do it. And most of us are not trained to be business owners. So by learning how to be a business owner, you're going to run a much better practice, which is going to turn into a much larger organization. And if you're in an advisory organization, you want to grow. How are you doing that? So working and putting that in to your organization will help everyone roll in the right direction, so that you are moving from whatever it might be billion to whatever it might be billion. So bees are good. We love bees.
Exactly. I was thinking about this as I was prepping for this episode. I was reading through stuff on your website and so forth. And a lot of what you discuss is fear of failure, things that are holding a person back, right? They what if I fail or whatever, or I'm not comfortable with that sale stuff. So there's a fear, right? Like, I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to come across as pushy or whatever. But I wonder if there's another segment that I'm curious about, like that pride and ego that comes in. Like, so some advisors are like really sure of themselves or really proud of what they have so far. However, when you hear the fear that they have isn't the fear of success or isn't the fear of pushing somebody away. It's almost the fear of change, of rocking the boat of what they have, right? So they might be making 300, 400, $500,000 a year. They've got a stable client book of business, but they know they need to do some things. They can see like they're smart enough to recognize some things, but like that ego is holding them back from trying something new. How do you help people get ego and pride out of the way through this process?
Well, so this is what we say. We say there's 10 people. If you think about 10 people, 6 people are very happy where their business is. Maybe they need to fix a few things, but they're pretty happy. And then there's 2 people that they're on the slippery slope. And if they don't do something tomorrow, they're probably out of business. And then there's 2 people who's at the top who know that they have to continue to be always on the cutting edge, always innovative, always working on something to improve, to be better. Because you don't have to be more, you can just be better. And being better actually attracts more than just wanting to be more. Those we call the elite athletes. And those are the people that, when you think about ego and getting the ego out of your system, most of those people are sitting in the 6 and they are not interested in moving into elite athletes. If you really want to be an elite athlete and you have that mentality, or you'd like to have that mentality, then you're leaving your ego at the door. You have to, because you think about Olympians. They're not, I've worked with 3 Olympians. They're the most humble people on the face of the planet. They are there to get better. And they just want to shave off a hundredth of a second in order to move from silver to gold. And that's really, if you start to think about that, if you have a huge ego, what is that doing to your organization? And if you were to shave off a hundredth of a second, could you
Yeah.
move your organization from silver to gold?
Yeah. I love it. It's funny you mentioned that, like the little microscopic changes. I watched this documentary years and years ago, back before Lance Armstrong became kind of shamed for, and had us, but it doesn't invalidate this stuff. They were the first team, like the team Discovery back then, to start really paying attention to like everything, looking for microscopic changes. Like, okay, should we switch from aluminum frames to carbon fiber frames? What about the angle of that we're sitting in when we're in the Peloton? What about how much wind resistance is on our shoes? How much, the cadence, like should the stiffness of the pedal, all, they went through every little thing. And they said, to your point, 100th of a second here and there. This is a 2,000-mile race. Over the course of a 2,000-mile race, if we can pick up a 100th of a second here, a half a second here, whatever, it leads to minutes margin of victory. And so the point you're making, this little microscopic changes over time lead to big results. It's kind of like, if you think about direction, right? If you just change 1 degree, it doesn't make much difference over the course of a day. But over the course of, miles and miles and miles, oh, we're way off course. It's a different platform here. So, and it gets back to what you said, that humbleness, right? Which is a great segue to one of the topic I want to cover. I want to circle back to your 6 killer questions there, and this concept of asking really good questions, because over the course of my life, I've had just a great experience of having some friends who are incredibly successful people and have done very well in their whatever endeavor they're doing. And I'm always impressed with how good they are at asking questions. It's just like part of their being, right? Like everybody would want to be like one of these people. And it's like, it's interesting. Every time I'm around you, I notice you ask me just a ton of questions, and then you ask this person to question, and they don't care if it's like the kid in college or they're talking to another CEO or whatever. It's always like they're looking to learn, they're looking to get more information in, or they're looking to use the questions to kind of direct where they want things to go. So it's really an interesting thing. I love that you kind of shy a light on this. Um, how can an advisor get better at asking the right questions to grow their business? I mean, obviously you got this list of 6 killer questions, but like, how do you suggest they get better at this process? Because it's not easy.
Oh, well, you have to be curious and asking questions. So there are a couple things you can do, and we teach this. Well, the first thing is to read a book by Mary Lee Adams called Change Your Questions, Change Your
Mm,
Life. It's a great book on how to ask questions. And what we say about advisors is they do ask a lot of questions because they do a lot of financial planning or conversations with. So they just have to learn how to ask the questions in new business development. That's all it is. It's a transferable skill set, is what we say. So that's the first thing. The second thing is something called, when I was a consultant, a newly minted consultant, before I became a business owner, is something called the question game. So the question game is that I ask a question and you have to answer me in a question, and we have to go back and forth until someone doesn't ask a question, and then you lose. So I will tell you that I am super. So when I learned this, I was much younger than I am now, and I was the champion. Like, first time out, I was like, oh, like, this is awesome. In all of my years of playing the question game, I have only lost once. And that was to a lawyer who happens to now be my boyfriend, because I was like,
That's
I like
funny.
you. Yeah. And he'll tell me, so yeah, you want to play the question game? I'm like, yeah, sure. I never can beat him. It makes me crazy.
That is hilarious.
Yeah. But if you do the question game, and just say to someone like, hey, can we play the question game? I'm going to ask you a question. You have to answer in a question, and you can't repeat it back. And you can take as long as you want to ask the question back. So you don't have to, because we usually rapid fire questions back and forth, right? But if you ask me a question and I kind of think about it and then ask the question back, which is what we should be doing in the new business development process, we start to get really comfortable with silence, and it doesn't feel weird for us. And it allows us to learn how to ask the question correctly. And that's something else that we teach, which is called smart person syndrome. That's something that I coined. So if you think about from when we go to kindergarten to when you graduate school, whatever level, we are conditioned that the person who raises their hand the fastest and answers the question correctly the quickest is the smartest person in the room. And financial advisors want to be the smartest person in the room. And what we tell them is smart person syndrome is getting in their way, and they have to learn how to ask really good questions. The smartest person in the room is the person who asks the question. Because if you ask the right questions, you can lead your potential client to saying yes to you, because they're buying in. You're not getting them to buy in. They're buying in themselves. So the question game really helps you learn how to pace yourself, to think about questions, to learn how to live with silence. So between that and the book, you get really good at asking questions.
I love that. I love that. And I love that little point you made about getting comfortable with the silence and taking your time, not rushing. And I think especially people like me who talk for a living can get much better at that. But it is a tool, actually. People hate uncomfortable silences. People feel like conversations it's just a natural human thing, at least in our society, where if you decide to stop talking or ask a question and let it hang, you'll be surprised at how quickly that future customer, potential customer, starts talking, right? That prospect, if you will, starts talking to fill the void, because they're just like, oh, it must be my turn to go right now. I have to, and part of your job, if you're sitting at that initial meeting, is to lead that potential customer into being an actual customer, right? To let you walk that one person or the couple or whatever down the road into becoming a customer. And well, sometimes you just might have to let them lead themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Couple of things I want to hit there real quick. I know we're running up close to the end of our time together. One, I wanted to follow back up on your DAT. What did you date?
Date and time.
Date and
DAT.
time, fairly simple to remember. I always remembered it as the book a meeting from a meeting, right? Like, so like, hey, if
Isn't
we're having a
DAT so
meeting,
much
right?
easier?
Yeah, I
DAT.
know. This is right.
Book a meeting to make a meeting. I can't remember that, but DAT I
Yeah,
can.
I know. No, it's
Did you
book a
get
meeting
that?
from the meeting, right? But anyways, no, I like that. It's great. Date and time for our next action item is wonderful. The other thing you hit on that I think is so important, especially for the modern financial advisory business, and this came up in a recent podcast, is training is becoming increasingly more important for advisors, because the nature of the business has changed, right? So most advisors are not coming into the business now, new advisors, and walking into a large company the way that they did in the old days, right? The old days, you'd walk into a big company. What do big companies do? Hey, we need to have a nice repetitive process. They are a business. They are not a practice. And so what do? Everybody goes through training. Everybody has the exact same playbook that they're coming out. This is how you make phone calls. This is how you send emails. This is how you open up a trade ticket, blah, 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 walk through, blah, 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 blah. Now, a young advisor might be joining a small firm. The senior advisor, who's the owner, that person might have been in business for 30 years. They had all the training in the old days, even though the business has changed since then. this new person has not been trained yet. And then you get frustrated, like, why is this, young 30 whatever junior advisor not know what the heck they're doing, or going slower than I did back in my days? They haven't been trained. So
if I may just say one thing about that, Mike. I had a colleague who used to say to me, show me a 20-year-old or 30-year-old who's invested in themselves through coaching, training, masterminding, and I'll show you someone who's super successful. Most of us don't come to coaching or consulting or training or any of that, whether you're a business owner or you're a solopreneur, until their 40s or 50s.
Yeah.
It's in some ways it's too late. What's really fascinating is we work with the number one woman in Prudential for a long period of time. And she would say to me, as a woman, you have to make the decision to invest in yourself, even when you have no money. Because if you invest in yourself and you hire a coach, you'll be that much more successful. And I remember when I started my company, the first person I hired was a coach. I didn't even have a dime in my bank account. And for the first 3 years, I paid the coach before I paid me. So if I can tell people that, in terms of training, yeah, you can read, yeah, you can talk, yeah, you can look at videos, webinars. Self-direction is great. But if you can hire someone, because think about elite athletes, they all have coaches and nutritionists, and they have a team around you. You do not need to do this alone.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between being an employee and being a business owner. Business owners invest in themselves, in their companies, in their personal development, and they're always looking to get better. As a modern financial advisor, you should be doing the same. And my client, when she hired us, she goes, I put aside 5 figures. Now, originally, she goes, in the beginning, I put around aside 4. But I have 5 figures that I set aside every year as my budget for training, for business development, for personal development that I use. How many of your people are doing that?
Fantastic. And so whether they're doing it on their own dime or you're doing it for them, providing that money, it's a really good investment. I love it. This is fantastic. Well, Dr. Jean, the results queen, Alsler, I think people are going to want to follow up. This is really a great conversation. Best way to find you, cavemanbrain.com, correct?
Correct.
And
yes.
I'm assuming you're active on LinkedIn and other places. Where else can people find you?
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, not TikTok. We're kind of thinking about that. Oh, just drop me an email at jean@getmoreresults.com. My mission in life is to leave you better than I found you. That's the mission of our company. So if you just want to ask me a question, I'm happy to answer.
Perfect.
Right? And our website at cavemanbrain.com has free stuff, webinars, courses. Like, come check it out and you get what you need, because that's what we do. We're here to leave you better than we found you.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. This was awesome. I really appreciate it.
I agree. Thank you very much for listening to and or watching this episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. It's always fantastic to have you with us. Huge props to Dr. Jean, the results queen, Alsler, for coming on the show. Love the things that she shared. Love her approach. The caveman brain concept is really easy to grok. Oh man, I'm just on a roll with this type of stuff. Anyway, by the way, I'm going to be appearing on Jean's new podcast soon whenever they start rolling out the episodes. I think I have the honor of being guest number 1. It's kind of cool. So keep an eye out for that. All right. As I mentioned at the top of the show, please do make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform and be nice to each other. We'll see you next time on the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. See ya. Bye.